Well, Diederik, thank you so much for joining us here today. It's a pleasure. I'm excited. And can you tell us a little bit about, without going into the whole long story of your life, which so many people can see in your wonderful YouTube videos, but tell us a little bit about how you got into the work you do and what drives your passion for it.
Yeah, it's a great question because there's so many ways of looking at it, but the short version would be that for a good 50 years of my life, I was absolutely driven by self-hatred, self-loathing, and there came a time when I turned around 50 when I said either there has to be a better way or I can finish this short journey around the sun and step out. And I had a place on the Vancouver to Whistler Highway where there was a very short stretch where there was no barrier. And if you went through there, then there would be a 2,000-foot drop and there'd be no risk of a wheelchair. But I decided to give it one shot. And a friend of mine had given us a Course in Miracles, which 2 years earlier I'd read one line in, which was sin is lack of darkness sin is lack of love as darkness is lack of light. And I thought that's an amazing statement and I totally agree. But then the next line had the Father and the Holy Spirit and the Son, and I said, this is not for me. So I threw it away, and 2 years later I got to that point where either I was going to finish it or something had to happen. And I opened the Course again, and this time I did not see the offending language. I just saw the message. And the message that I got from the Course was varied, but consistent with all the other major universal spiritual teachers that I was very familiar with. And that is that this world is a dream, that you are the dreamer, that who you are has never been affected by who you think you are, or by what you think you've done, or by what you think has been done to you. In other words, it completely eliminated the possibility of being a victim. And I'd been a very, very faithful victim for a long time, starting with 3.5 years in concentration camps, which was a good victim position to begin with, and then continued because I was just getting evidence for my self-hatred wherever I went. Absolutely stunning how effective that idea is once you recognize that everything in my life has been chosen by the false self or by the loving self.
Well, and there's a dynamic that you just alluded to, which is so powerful, which is if you hold a belief, your mind will show you the evidence to prove that belief.
Inevitable. Absolutely. And that's why I love the idea that whatever you have in your life, you have chosen. That's why our organization is called Choose Again. What that Choose Again does not really address is that you cannot choose as long as you don't transform your core beliefs. You have no free will. It's the core beliefs that do the choosing for you. And once I recognized that, I also recognized that these core beliefs were chosen by me, in my case, 78, 79 years ago. And I had always believed them, never questioned them. I had seen a few psychiatrists who basically told me I was a hopeless case and get used to it. But then I realized, no, that's not true. I really began to understand that there's no such a thing as personality. I began to appreciate that there was no such a thing as character. And that all these personality, character, who you think you are just inventions. And to own that invention joyfully and say, wow, that attests to some power, but also it attests to the possibility or the potential to transform these. And that's what I set out to do. And I said, well, the course clearly has 365 lessons, so my mouth is not too rusty. I can figure out that's a year program. So I thought I'd give it a year. And if it doesn't work, I can always find a spot to drive my car off the road. But I already knew within a week that my life was changed. It was absolutely dramatic how fast that went. And then after a month or so of doing this work by myself in wonderful solitude, somebody said, there's something different about you. Can I come and talk to you about what you're doing? And I said, absolutely. And then a few more people came, and then one person said, can I give you some money for this? And I said, yeah, wonderful. And by the end of the year, I was a therapist, which I've never been. I don't have any official credentials. So it's been an absolutely incredible journey, which has brought experiences that I never could have imagined.
Well, and the one thing that pops in my mind to say, to clarify for people, is that when I say I'm experiencing, only those things I've chosen, it's not to say that I chose to be in the camp or that I chose to have a tornado knock down my house, but my interpretation of what that means is what creates my experience of it.
Precisely.
And
you can, if you're ready for it, you can go a step further and say, yes, I'm also responsible for everything at the deepest level. Because as Buddhism and part of Hinduism teaches, this is a dream, and I'm the dreamer. So I'm choosing this dream. So I have no problem taking on 100% responsibility. I invented the camp. I'm completely okay with that. Now, to most people, that is insane, so I tend not to go there. But I'm very comfortable with that idea. But what you said is absolutely valid, because most people are not willing to take 100% responsibility for everything, but to be responsible for the interpretation is an immensely freeing idea.
Well, and the critical part for me is I'm trying to help people come for therapy, or they come with various issues to the Journey's Dream or any kind of a spiritual self-help thing, is regardless of whether or not I think I created the camp, if I use your 6-step choose again process, my experience gets better.
Mm-hmm. Completely.
My life gets better.
Yeah. Yeah. And the beauty of that, of the process, is that I always take it back to what I, in the process, call the earliest memory. Now, the earliest memory may be 2 months ago. It's not genuinely the earliest memory, but that may be all you're capable of at this point. Then you do your work at that level. Eventually, and I had clients who said they had memories from in utero, and I thought, well, that's a little steep for me. But then I had an experience where that became clear too. So things have happened to us, and what we've done with them is a demonstration of who we think we are, what we've constructed. The architecture of the self is completely self-made. So I can undo that at the speed that I'm ready to do it at. I can take years, or it can take 2 weeks, or I can take 1 day. So the time it takes to achieve a level of healing that brings joy in your life is however long you choose it to take. How long do I want to be right? And as long as I want to be right, that you should not have spoken to me like that, or that my father should not have been drinking, or that my mother should not have been depressed, then I'll stay there. And as soon as I say, I don't want to be right anymore, I don't want to be right, I've been wrong all my life, it is time to admit that I'm wrong. And how do I know I'm wrong? I'm not happy. It's that simple.
Yeah, I'm in pain.
Yeah.
If I'm in pain, I'm in error.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So you started that out, and then you had, within a year, you were a therapist. And what's it progressed to? What is the current status of your life as a therapist, or as an intensive center leader, or whatever?
Yeah, looking back at it, it's been really a remarkable experience in that, like by the end of the year, I had a full practice, and then somebody came to me 3 years into it and said, I have a very, very difficult adopted son who has all kinds of issues. He gets kicked out of school. He gets into fights. He's into drugs. He's just an all-around bad actor, and I don't know what to do with him, but here is some money. Can you please take him away? And she wanted me to take him to Costa Rica, and I was familiar with Costa Rica at that point already. And I said, okay, I will, but not one-on-one. So I asked a colleague of mine, and we invited 5 other teenagers. And so the 7 of us set out to spend 2 months in the jungle, seeing what healing could take place, not just for the kids, but also for ourselves. And it was an unbelievable experience of intense confrontation with the self, the small s self, mutually, both between the so-called kids and ourselves. And one thing that becomes so clear in our work really quickly is that I'm doing this work for me. I'm not a nice guy. I'm not here to help you. I'm here to help myself, and you bring me that healing. And that was so clearly demonstrated in the 2 months we spent with those kids. And then after that, that same person, a year later said, if you wanted to open a center in Costa Rica, I've just sold the house and I'm willing to invest 50,000. And I wasn't particularly concerned because we needed a lot more than 50,000 to open a center. So I said, well, that's wonderful. But then within a week, we had 250. People came from nowhere. Suddenly, one person as much as 100 and several others 50 and a few 75. And before you know it, we had 250, and that was enough. So off I went to Costa Rica at age 63 and started the center with my daughter and a team of volunteers. Worked our asses off, transformed the place, which was a complete disaster area, basically a large garbage dump, and transformed it into an unspeakably beautiful environment, high up in the hills overlooking a lake, surrounded by rainforest, where we now do our residential work.
Yeah, I remember hearing you say something about the synchronicity there, or coming home, because at an earlier time in your life you were up at about the same elevation with a lake.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I was born in Indonesia on the island of Java after the Japanese had invaded Indonesia. So my parents had fled into the mountains hoping to escape the Japanese. And that place where I was born was at 2,500 feet on a lake in the tropics. So when I discovered this place, 2,500 feet on the lake in the tropics, the same smells, the same sounds. It was like a salmon coming home.
Well, so how often are you there, and what kind of schedule do you run of having, whatever you call it, intensives or retreats there?
Yeah, I used to be there permanently with very frequent trips to Canada and the States and Europe for teaching and workshop, but I basically was based there. 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with lung cancer, as well as a host of other wonderful things, and that put a stop to working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. So I took off, went to Victoria. Stacy, my partner, and I healed the cancer, but then other issues came up, as I mentioned to you. A number of messages that this body is worn out, and start treating it differently. And the crazy thing is, of course, that I still have the back of my mind, if I can lick what I have right now, then I'll be back to being 50 years old. And I can but no, you're 79 and just behave yourself accordingly is the message I keep getting. But the center is there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It has a phenomenal staff. I mean, our staff are all ex-clients, so they're all people who've come through the program, and who, through their dedication to their own healing, of course, immediately recognize that the most efficient way to heal is to help others, is to be involved in the healing of other people. And so the staff that is there, permanent staff, they come and go, but it's pretty much permanent, have thousands of hours of training with virtually any kind of psychological model you can bring to the table, from schizophrenia to bipolar to borderline to chronic depression, but mostly just to issues where they're having a little bit of trouble, like a relationship, a marriage. I don't know how to deal with my teenagers. I've lost my second job in 2 years. What can I do about that? So basic, really practical things that seem unsolvable, because people are told, well, that's who you are, that's your personality. And for them to come and recognize that's not true. I can actually be anything and anyone I wish to be. So people come for anywhere from a week to the longest has been several years, and that was a schizophrenic person who had nowhere else to go. It was either she would come and stay with us for free, or she would be locked up in an institution and we'd never see her again. And there's nothing in my mind, if I can help anyone avoid what I call the curse of pharmaceuticals, I will do that. Now, having said that, I quickly want to say that pharmaceuticals absolutely have a role to play. If I'm about to hang myself and you say, here's a pill, it'll make you feel better, I will take that pill. But not as a life sentence. I will take it in order to calm down my mind, to give me some space, to give me some breathing room, and then to get to work and recognize in the long run, I do not need medication. In the short run, absolutely, they have a vital role.
So several questions are bubbling up for me. One of them is, how do people find out about that center in Costa Rica, and how do they get in touch with you? Where's most of your referral flow for that? Is that all coming through the chooseagain.com website?
It comes partially through the website, mostly to the videos that we have on YouTube. People see those. We have a number that are extremely frequently watched and have a lot of information. But I would say that 80% is word of mouth. People that have been there tell their friends, or their friend notice. And if you go there with your partner and all your friends know you're in trouble, but you come back holding hands and clearly being in love with the self and each other, then that piques interest. So it's word of mouth. It is, we've always been really bad at what I call mainstream marketing. I have no idea how to do that. And it's never really appealed to me. There are people that are good at that, but we are not. And it's funny, we had a client a long time ago who wrote a little newsletter, and one of the items was about me, how to run the most successful healing center on the planet and not make money. So that seems to be our specialty.
Great title. Yep.
Yeah. So money, we've never been driven by money. Let's put it that way.
So the website is choose-again.com.
Yeah.
And one of the primary tools is your 6-step Choose Again forgiveness process. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a tool that sort of organically grew in the first year of my work. We had another process that we used that we modified to arrive at this one. And this one is really simple and straightforward. And the ego finds it almost unbearably difficult. But it starts with the first step, which is to acknowledge that you're upset, which means I'm not at peace. And for most of us, including me, that is only 23 hours and 58 minutes a day. But to acknowledge it is really difficult. We're not in the habit. We're saying, well, it's not a big deal, or she always talks like that, or of course it's going to rain today, why wouldn't it, whatever. We ignore upsets, but we ignore upsets at our peril, because an upset has an unbelievably healing purpose. So to recognize that I'm upset is the first step. The second step is probably the most radical of the process, and that's it's about me. It's not about my mom, it's not about my dad, it's not about my siblings or my teacher or the concentration camps. It's not about any of that. It's just about me, 100%, unquestionably. Most people say, interesting, but, and then they come out with all the exceptions, but you cannot make an exception. This is one step that is absolute. If you're not willing to take it, that's perfectly fine. But if I'm not willing to take it, then I rejoin the ranks of victims.
You don't need to go to the other 4.
No. you stay in your wonderful victim position, and it's all your fault. There you are, it's your fault. If you don't want to do that, then step 2 is a breakthrough. the next step is to recognize what I'm feeling at the moment. And for me, that was very difficult because I had only two feelings. That was rage and numb. Partially because I drank and did a lot of drugs in those days, but also because I didn't allow myself to feel. And that goes right back to the camps. So I designed a feeling sheet, which has some 64 feelings on it, which we use, and I used to use religiously till I learned how to feel. And it took me a little while, and to my, maybe not surprise, but I've recognized that a lot of people are not particularly aware of their feeling. Why is that important? Because the feeling is chosen by a belief. So each belief that I have chooses feelings. Now, it could be that one belief chooses different feelings, and when you go through the process, you come out of that belief. It could also be that there's several beliefs in one upset. So the first thing you do then is to say, what am I feeling? What is the strongest feeling right now? Is that a familiar feeling? And the answer is yes, because I don't make new feelings. Any feeling I have now is a replay of what I felt from the age from 0 to 8. So it's a familiar feeling. Then I say, take that feeling and allow it to walk you back to when you were a little boy or a little girl. What was happening? Somebody did or said something around you, and you at that moment chose this feeling and you made up something about you. What do you think that was? And then almost without fail, I would say 95% of the time, people go to an early memory and immediately recognize what it was. So now I know the belief that chose that feeling is, you name it. I'm not good enough is an incredibly common one for everyone on the planet. I'm not loved. I don't belong. I have no right to be here. Whatever I do, it will never be successful. It will never be enough. Those are pretty classic core beliefs that we walk around with. Then the forgiveness is not so much a forgiveness for what I've done or what anybody else has done. It is a forgiveness for that belief. I forgive myself for believing this because it's not true. But the I that does the forgiveness is not the ego I. It is the third part of the mind. And the third part of the mind is the loving self that has never been touched, never been affected, hasn't changed, is simply waiting for me to welcome it back in. That is the part that does the forgiveness. The decision maker, which is the second part of the mind, is the one that has to choose to do that. The first part of the mind is the ego, which is the set of beliefs, the construction we call Diederik or we call Timothy. So the forgiveness, God forgive me for believing that I'm not good enough. That is not true, says the loving self. You are good enough. It doesn't matter what you do or what you've done. You are good enough. Whether you're a dishwasher or whether you're president of the United States, you are good enough. You have nothing to prove. And when people hear that their worth is intrinsic, first of all, they reject it out of hand. And then I say, close your eyes for a minute and allow in, how would it feel if that was true? How would it feel if the value you have is an intrinsic value, which you cannot improve, you cannot decrease it? How would that feel? And then absolutely without fail, their face lights up and say, well, that would be incredible. Great, then that's how you're going to live. And then the last step is the last forgiveness. Second forgiveness is forgive me for forgetting that who I am has never been touched, has never been affected. No matter what happened, no matter how deeply traumatic society calls my early youth, it can have had no effect on me unless I chose it. And the I that chose that effect is the I we're transforming. And that's the process.
And that whole ability to identify the belief system that I chose, that I download, and then question it and see the false nature of it is key to a whole series of works like this. And yours is this wonderful, simple process. It's so similar to a host of others. It's a delight to find yet another person who's teaching it from a slightly different perspective. The same basic dynamic. I mean, this is how we function as human beings. We're creating our experience of life, and we're doing it every time we know we experience a tension or a negative emotion. We could use it as the wake-up call. It says, hey, Tim, your thoughts are off the mark. Choose again.
Yeah. Or, maybe not true, Tim, your thoughts are off the mark, but your thoughts are telling you something about you that's not true.
Yeah, the belief is false.
Yeah. You're mistaken.
Yeah.
And then never, ever, ever, ever make yourself wrong. So if you're not willing, if I'm not willing to do a process, I'm not willing to do a process right now. That will not affect who I am either. I just won't feel very good for a while.
Yeah.
And it has happened, believe it or not, even after 25 years of doing this, that I still have moments where I don't want to process. I want to be right. And then I hear that voice, and I hear myself laughing at the same time. But there's such a block. There's such an addiction.
Well, there's a wonderful video available with you and Gabor Mate, and he says, hey, I was over at Diederik's place, and I learned this stuff, and then my wife didn't pick me up from an airport, and I spent 3 days pouting. Right? You know, it's a choice, and it's okay. What we often tell people is choose to be gentle with yourself as soon as you can, even in those times where you're not willing to pick up a tool and resolve the issue at a fundamental level. Let yourself be aware that you're okay even when you're not feeling great.
Right, and there is a very distinct but fine line between being gentle and being indulgent. And indulgent means I'm going to sit in this, I deserve to feel this, I have a right to feel this. That is indulgent. Gentle means I'm not really somehow, for some reason, prepared to heal this right now. And that's okay. I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it 5 minutes from now, or I'll do it next week, but I'm going to get around to it right now. I'm not willing. That's okay. But don't justify it. Don't say I have a reason to feel this. That is the difference. So I never justify how I feel, but sometimes I'm not immediately jumping into a process.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, if I argue for my limitations, they are mine.
Yep.
If I try
and you can be very convincing.
Yeah. I tend to believe it because it comes from a really good source, right? Me. I think I know.
Yeah.
And that whole idea of being gentle with myself, Sylvia Boorstein, a Jewish Buddhist grandmotherly type, would put her hand over her heart space whenever she's upset and just talk to herself gently and say, Sylvia, sweetheart, you're in pain. Mm-hmm. Take a few deep breaths, calm down, then we'll look at what's going on, then we'll decide what to do.
Yeah.
But if I try to act from that pain state, even when I'm deciding I'm right and I don't want to do this, then I can, beat myself up pretty good.
And I'll get more evidence. See, that's the how I mean, remember Einstein's question, is there's a benevolent universe? And the answer is, of course, yes, but it's benevolent in a way that people don't recognize as benevolent. And that, from my point of view, is it keeps sending me the same pain till I recognize this is not pain. This is an offering of healing. I need to change my mind about what is being offered here. I'm not suffering. Suffering is my interpretation. And once I get that, then I can say, well, who's the I interpreting? That I have to transform. Otherwise, I get the same interpretation.
Yeah, one of my favorite teachers is Dr. Michael Rice, and he says, he's probably not the first one to say it, but he talks about it this way. He says, the purpose of pain is to make my ears grow so I can listen to what I need to change.
Yep,
and Guy Finley will say that the lessons I need to learn in life ride into my life on the back of the events I don't want.
Right. Yeah.
If I reject the event, I lose the lesson.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll keep coming. That's the beauty. And they're all replays of something that happened 79 years ago. It's the same thing over and over till they say, okay, I get it. I better heal this. And then the healing is almost immediate. often not permanent. Often the relief is temporary because the belief is powerful. We often compare it to if you're in Costa Rica and on our property it's 90% rainforest and 10% is where the buildings are and there's a bit of area of grass, etc. But it's mostly rainforest. And if you want to make a path in the rainforest, you need a strong arm and you need a very sharp machete, and you can make a path. Now, if you come back a week later, that path is gone. You won't find it. It's the same with this work. So the ego's neural pathways are like a 12-lane highway that every thought automatically runs on. And the new pathway that you and I are making together is that little path in the rainforest. Now, if I'm committed to my healing, I will turn that little path in the rainforest into a 12-lane highway. I will neglect the ego's neural paths. They will now turn into the rainforest. So after a while of doing this work, you will notice, and I've noticed, and I'm sure you have too, wow, I suddenly reacted really lovingly, where before I would have been irritated or annoyed.
Yep.
And this time I just looked at it with love and had a wonderful time. That's the new highway.
And there are also times where I did a lot of work and I got pretty good at being calm, and then I get triggered. Mm-hmm. And I was, if I'm honest and I look at it, I went back to camp and slept for a couple weeks, and the forest overgrew and the ego pathway is opened up again.
Yep, yep. So, and I'm glad you said that, because it's not this is not a fix. And people expect, we're so living in a society of fixes. Give me a pill, give me a line of Coke, give me a pill, give me a joint, give me a glass of wine, and everything is fine. That's what we're used to. We're not used to saying, this will take a while. We're going to make progress. That's inevitable. There's a wonderful line in the Course in Miracles that retrogression is temporary. So you do have setbacks. I do. But it's always temporary. Not only that, but the level of comfort, which before was at a -40, the comfort zone where I thought I should live, over time has been raised to a +5. So it never goes down to -40 anymore. It now goes from a 9 or a 10 down to a 5. It's okay, work to be done. So the fluctuation gets narrower and narrower.
I think about the idea of the muscle memory. And we tell people, when you started to throw a ball, you weren't very good at it. But if you practice, eventually your body gets that muscle memory. Exactly. I just finished talking to an integrative psychiatrist yesterday who talks about how ridiculous it is that we teach children at 3 and 4 and 5 years old to wash their face and hands and brush their teeth and take a bath on a regular basis. And we don't teach them the mental, emotional hygiene. And there are these specific tools we can use, and we should be using every day, right, to clean up the system, or as in your analogy, to clear more of the path in the rainforest. Yeah. And if we do that, we get the results. If we don't, we get the other results. Right. We get the auto process.
Exactly. And that's because we're so used to behavior modification. So we think if we only behave well, we're okay. But that puts an enormous strain on the inner system where behaving well goes against who I think I am. And that becomes impossible. So for a little 3 or 4-year-old that already hates himself to take care of his body by washing his hands, washing his face, taking showers, whatever, is an effort. If we taught that same little 3.5-year-old, 4-year-old who they are in truth, then taking a shower, brushing your teeth and washing your face is automatic because it's a loving thing to do. But our society and our way of therapy, mainstream therapy, has reversed cause and effect. And to look at the behavior and think you can change the behavior and thereby get a different result is, from my experience, just absolutely insane. I mean, how many people buy gym memberships in the first week of January? And how many are still going 2 weeks later? You're going against your core beliefs. You can only do that for a while, and then it becomes unbearable.
So rewriting those core beliefs, dismantling the negative ones.
Right.
And one of the things I like about your Choose Again 6-step forgiveness process is that, contrary to what a lot of people think that the old long-term therapy was, the psychodynamic, psychoanalytic, rather than going back and digging through my childhood, what I'm doing is I'm living my life today. And when something comes up and I notice I'm upset, I use the process.
Right.
And if that process takes me back to 2 weeks ago and a core belief I downloaded back then, I go there. If it takes me to 20 years ago, I go there. I go to whatever it is that's up in my mind at the moment that's got that energetic resonance with the false belief that's driving this. And it's just so practical that it stays right at what's happening with me right now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the additional beauty, and I love our mutual understanding of our work. The additional beauty is that clients immediately know that the message they get from me and from everyone within the organization is, you don't need me. I'm only here to tell you there is a door, and I'm here to show you how I opened the door, and that's it. You're learning everything you need to learn. So one of the reasons for writing my book is because I recognize that, yes, 1,000 people can come to the center in a year, but another 1 million will never go anywhere because they don't have the funds, they don't have the availability, they can't leave their family or their job. And for them, this process is absolutely doable by yourself. That's how I've designed it.
Well, and I love it that way. You just reminded me of your book. I thought, what kind of an interview am I? Yeah, the book. I read the book. I have it on Kindle. I have all kinds of things highlighted. I thought, hey, when we do this, I have to ask them about this story or that story. But I got so excited just having you here face to face that I forgot all about that. But it is a wonderful book. I've read it. I've highlighted things from it. And I highly recommend it. I was going to look up real quick. What year did that get published?
I just came, there's a book that I read every day and I make notes on it, and I think it's almost 2 years ago to the day.
So it's a fairly new book, and yeah. I have to help you promote it here for a minute. The title of the book is Choose Again, right?
Yeah, it's Choose Again.
Six steps to freedom. Diederik Wolsak.
I can show you.
There you go.
There it is.
It's harder to do when you get it on.
Is it in a mirror image or is it straight?
It's beautiful.
Okay.
Yep. And we have the idea that you just purported. That's what I love so much about this. A lot of my favorite teachers have put so much stuff out there on the internet free. And here's the steps, here's the tools, and that's what you've done with this book. It's a beautiful representation of, first here's a 6-step process, and then here's a chapter for each of the steps, and then here are some stories, right? Here are some actual descriptions. Yeah, the case studies, the descriptions of how people have used this in their lives, how you've used it in your life. And I highly recommend the book. It's delightful.
Did you have some questions? You said you had something you wanted
I highlighted all kinds of stuff, and I was going to, say, have Diederik tell us about this story or that story. One of them is this elderly client that you saw many years ago. It's from page 111 in the book. He was on 12 medications, and it quickly became apparent we're not going to be able to access any true feelings when he was on all of those, because it was like a dark blanket of stuff on him. That's one of the things that I'm very glad you said it the way you did. Medications may have a purpose, like a cast for a broken arm, but if I leave that cast on there too long, it's not helping anymore, right? The arm's going to atrophy, and that's the kind of thing that happens so often. There's a gentleman who began the same here global movement, and same here, global.org. And he has a story like that where he had a mental emotional collapse, and they tried to look for a physical problem. There weren't any. And the first time he went to a doctor, he left with 5 medications. And then several years later, he'd been through every medication they have. I think they said over 50 medications. And it wasn't until he ran into a therapist who told him the kinds of things that you would tell him. Hey, look, there's more to this than just taking pills. Why don't you take a breath? Why don't you look inside a little bit? Let me tell you, that his life opened up again.
Yeah. Yeah, and the challenge is that people most of the time do feel better on medication. But what they'll never achieve or would never reach or where they'll never land is in a state of true joy. On medication, it's always described as coping. I'm managing really well. I'm managing my anger. I'm managing my fear. I don't want to manage anger or fear. I want to look at the eye that's afraid. I want to look at the eye that gets angry. I want to transform that eye. I used to be addicted to anger. I was angry all the time. I was just sharing with my partner when I was 8, when I was sent to a foster home in Holland. Within a day, I was physically fighting the entire school. They would surround me at recess, and I was this little boy of 8 years old, fighting with every single person that would come within 10 feet of me. That was my self-hatred attracting immediate evidence. Fast forward 14 years later, or 13 years later, I'm in the army. The first day in the army, in the barracks, I have 200 people after me. Absolutely unbelievable. I've never, in my experience with others, seen a similar overwhelming attraction of self-hatred. I mean, and people ask me, how did they even know you? I don't know how they knew me, but they knew me.
Well, it's very useful for me because we're hearing this in a slightly different format when you're saying that I'm going to see the evidence that helps prove the false belief or the negative belief that I hold about myself.
Yeah.
And just that slight twist on the same dynamic that we talk about in some of our other work, that I have the infinite capacity to choose the focus of my conscious awareness in each moment. And it's that focus of conscious awareness in each moment that creates what I experience, my experience of life. Well, along comes Diederik and he says, hey, on top of that, if I'm holding a negative belief, I am going to see the evidence that proves me right.
Yep. Over and over and over.
And sometimes in mystical ways, like you just said. How do all these people know that I'm such a hateful person?
Yeah, no, it's mind-blowing. It really is. It's so interesting how it works. Now, part of my story is not only was I borderline personality, but I also had a fair degree of autism. So in school, I was kicked out of every class within 5 minutes. And I was sent to 3 different schools, and my parents just didn't know what the hell to do with me scholastically. And if I look back at it, I never knew why I was kicked out. It was always I blurted out something. I didn't know what it was. I'll tell you one little story. I'm not sure whether it's in the book or not, but it's priceless. Years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, I was doing a deep meditation. In that meditation, I had a loving memory, and I couldn't really place the details of the memory, but it was an experience of acceptance. And an experience of acceptance was extraordinarily rare for me for the first 50 plus years of my life. So I went back into meditation, and I was in grade 8 in a German class, and my teacher, who was a brilliant teacher, fluent German, said something, and I didn't really hear him. And then he said something again, I didn't really hear him. And then I felt his hand on my left shoulder, and he says, "Das genügt, Elise," which is German for "that's enough, Elise." And what was happening, I was whistling für Elise in class without knowing it, because I was autistic. Every other teacher kicked me out. he accepted it. He welcomed it, but he diffused it by love and acceptance. And that is so rare for us. It's so rare that we have that.
Yeah, there's a lovely story about, I forget the name of the woman, but she's talking about a very similar thing, and she was in class, and she's really struggling to get things right and to be a good student, etc. And the teacher decides to have a lesson on prepositions. And so she says, here's the box, and what's your relationship to the box? And the student is thinking, how can I be related to a box? I mean, I'm related to my mother and so every question the teacher asked, the student was answering from this very literal interpretation. And the story is beautiful. If you can't, as the teacher, understand there's a disconnect and try and reach, the connection, then you just throw the student out.
Yep.
Or you ridicule him or her, or you assume that they have a negative intention. And
right. Yeah, no, that's exactly what happened. I'm the only person I think that I know has done grade 8 3 times. They failed me twice, and the third time they failed me. Finally, my mother took my side, which never happened. It was always the teachers are right. I don't want to hear about it, but this time, so she went to the school director and went over my grades, and the school director, the principal said, yes, his grades, he's passing, but we don't like him.
Honesty. From honesty. Wow. Well, so what's an aspect of either the work you're doing or projects that you're starting that I haven't even asked you about yet that we should include here before we wrap up?
What we can include is that we teach workshops in the south of France every September. So this September on, we have 3 workshops in a wonderful place. I don't know if you've heard of Rennes-le-Château. Became famous through the Da Vinci Code.
Okay.
That's where it started. Beautiful medieval town on the hill, and we're right below it at the foot of the hill. And we do 3 one-week workshops there in September. 2 in English and 1 in Dutch, because I was Dutch and I still try to speak it, even though people laugh when I speak it. But and those are fun to go to. They're incredibly intense, and they're a great opportunity for people to see a part of the world that they may not be familiar with, and particularly with the COVID lockup. I'm really, I mean, my ego is quite eager to have a different experience from being in my office for the last 16, 17 months. So I'm looking forward to going. Don't know.
So is information about that at the choose-again.com website?
It either is on there today or it will be on there within a day or two, because we just finalized the dates. It took a while to get some clarity whether it's going to be done this year. But I think all the signals are on green. Travel is opening up, and so we've decided to go ahead and do it.
And, of course, the place in Costa Rica is open.
The place in Costa Rica is open, and we're already receiving clients. And that, there's something about it that keep in mind you're surrounded by rainforest. And if you haven't been in the rainforest, that is an experience that cannot be described. There's a life force. Everything is alive in the forest. It's never quiet. I have fairly severe tinnitus, and if you have tinnitus, then you know what it sounds like, because that's what the rainforest sounds like. It's at night. It's a constant sound. But I've had people that sit on the porch in the morning after arriving the evening before and saying, "This is all I need. I'm beginning to heal already." Yeah, it's a primal healing environment.
Yeah, and when we isolate ourselves from nature as much as we do, it creates problems we're not even aware of. So that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So there was another thought that was just in my head. Let's see if it'll come back. Come on.
Oh, you have that too, have you? Short-term memory is overrated.
So I was thinking in terms of if there's a counselor or a therapist, do you have a special kind of a program for that? Do you just invite those people to go to Costa Rica or your other workshops? Do you hold workshops out in British Columbia where you are? In fact,
yeah, we do, and we will again. Now we're opening up again. We teach workshops in the States and in Canada, in Europe, England, pretty well anywhere people want. Somebody in LA says, I have 14 people or 15 people that would like one of you to come and teach a workshop. We'll come.
All right, excellent.
But again, from my point of view, and it's not financially beneficial to the.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask you to stop a minute. And just take a breath. We had a glitch in the connection. So you said something about it's not financially something.
Oh, what I was about to say is not in our financial interest, but eventually I wanted to make clear that this work is designed to be done by yourself. In the beginning, everybody needs help. Everybody needs a teacher. There's no question about it, even though we all know the teachers within, but most people don't know that. And to learn that the teachers within is what we're about. After that, we step back, you know the work. And now I take very few new clients, but if I get a new client, the first thing I say, have you read the book? If not, read the book first, because then we're halfway there. If I start with you brand new and I have to teach you, it's going to cost you 100 times what the book costs in terms of finances. So
right.
keep your money in your pocket, do your work, come to us for fine tuning, come to us for when you're really stuck or you're in a situation suddenly where you say, I can't do this. I'm just not ready for this. Then we're ready for you. We're here. But most of the time you can handle these things. One of the things we always start with, or I always start with, is telling a client there's nothing wrong with you. And usually they get upset and they'll say, haven't you read my file? And I said, no, I don't read files, but there's nothing wrong with you.
Well, I love that. There's another aspect of the book, and maybe we can talk a little bit more after this, but I just wanted to mention that you just triggered the memory that there's a part where you talk in the book that you sit and listen to people, and sometimes they're telling these horrible, horrible stories, and you're just calm. Right. And they say, what's wrong with you? Aren't you hearing this horrible thing that happened to me? And you say, yes, I hear it, but I'm not as interested in that as I am interested in your true self, your true loving nature. If you start telling me about that, I might be in tears in a minute. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Love still brings me to tears. There's no question. Stories don't affect me anymore. My biggest challenge and healing was in the area of anger. Anger used to scare the living shit out of me, and it doesn't affect me anymore. I now know that if I am angry, which happens once every 10 years, it is just old guilt that I'm projecting on you. I'm blaming you for something that I think I did. If somebody else is doing the same thing, it's a cry for love, and I look at it with love. It's not impressed.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I realize that we're at the end of the hour. We've pushed what they like to have as a podcast limit, but thank you so much for agreeing to this. It's delightful to meet you face to face, and maybe we'll see you sometime in either France or Costa Rica or wherever.
That would be wonderful, Tim.
And I will look forward to continuing to. Your book is one that I will have in rotation that I'll probably read every year, and I have to encourage people to go to your YouTube videos. You're very generous with those and with your time, and I thank you for being so generous with your time with us today.
And I really want to thank you for the kindred spirit and the shared commitment to our own healing. So thank you, Tim. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Blessings.
Blessings. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.